What's up, Chris?
What's going on, Jay? Welcome,
It's
welcome, welcome,
Tuesday.
everyone. It is Tuesday, and that
Just
means,
another Tuesday.
yeah, not like last week. Last week was felt like another Tuesday, but was a much, much different Tuesday than that.
For
This week,
sure.
this week is just a regular Tuesday, and you're here. You're here because you're watching the Practice Playbook, the show where we help firm owners and wannabe firm owners navigate the road for their modern firms. I am Chris Gino. He is Jay Kimmelman, and we're here to talk to you all about that. Last week, we talked about automation. We highlighted why automations can be so helpful, how you can utilize them, and we talked through some of our favorites. Uh, this week, we'll talk about the impacts of last Tuesday and the recent election and its impacts on both your practice and your clients. But before we do that, let's get to the news. The other news, as if there is actually other news. There is.
Seemed
First,
like there
and
was a lot of news this week.
yeah, yeah, and I'm not sure if that's because I changed the way I was gathering the news, which we can talk a little bit about. We could talk about that a little bit more later. And these are just headlines with low impact. We can talk about that as we talk through the news. Or if there was just a lot of activity because it's the end of the year, because it's like right before holiday season where lots of people are doing their last budget spends and all the stuff that goes along with that. There could be all kinds of reasons, but it did feel like there was a lot of news this week. But again, we'll see if that's a consistent theme, or if this is not really, if the news is not really all that newsworthy and it's just like points of note. But first, the IRS and some tax items that aren't related to the election. Let's talk about those. I read an article, Jay, where the taxpayer advocate criticized the IRS's move to shorten notice requirements. That seems like a really good idea, like to criticize here. Like, don't we want notice requirements to be like longer, right? Like, what's the output here? Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, that's definitely a good thing. I mean, I will tell you, and I'll get into this story a little bit later, but I
Yeah.
called the IRS this morning due to a notice, and the notice was basically alerting me of a client being put into collections, and
Hmm.
payment was already made on the account, but it had crossed. So, let's expand some of those deadlines out. And,
Yeah.
and I thought it was kind of interesting. First of all, putting a 2023 tax return penalty, which came out 4 months ago, into
Mm.
uh, private collections already. I thought
Wow.
that
Yeah,
was
that's
quite
crazy.
quick to do that. So I
Yeah.
think the taxpayer advocate needs to slow down the IRS on some of their
Yeah.
shortening of their notices and the other requirements that are going on.
Yeah. So good job, taxpayer advocate. Way to be there for the taxpayers. You were advocating in a way that we support. So good job. We've talked a lot about BOI reporting, and I saw a news article this week, Jay, that that FinCEN or whoever it is that's responsible for managing this process is reporting that there's been 6.5 million of these BOI reports filed, which sounds like a really big number, until you realize that there are 32 million of them that need to be reported, um, and they're due at the end of the year, which means that we're 75% of the way through the year and maybe 25% of the way through what needs to be filed. So, uh, everyone out there, get your act together. We've talked to you about this. The process is it takes just a few minutes to do for you, or if you feel comfortable offering this as a service line to your clients, like this is something that you could do on their behalf. Um, their The reporting is not that complex, and once you get the what is it called? ID. What's the thing called?
The
Real ID.
FinCEN ID.
FinCEN ID, sure. Yeah. Once you get the
Yes.
FinCEN ID, like then it's like really easy, isn't that right, Jay?
Oh, for sure. It takes less than
Yeah.
5 minutes to do it at that point. But I will
Yeah.
tell you, I've been seeing TikToks of all things saying how
Mm.
frightened people are of having to file the BOI report. And all you're doing, you're giving them the same information that the state you registered this company in has, and that you are probably filing every year. It's not a big deal. So just, pull up your big boy pants, file your BOI, and get over it. It doesn't even
Your
cost
big boy
anything to file
pants.
it unless you want to pay somebody to do it for you. I mean, it's free and it's easy. Just do it. That's it.
Remember, it's due by the end of the year. We're talking 5 minutes. Should be relatively easy for most people to do. You're giving
Yep.
information about a business, like Jay mentioned. You're giving business information that you've already given to other people. Like this is not like something that you're like trying to keep secret. You're not giving trade secrets away. You're not doing anything like that. You don't even have to. If I'm right, Jay, if I remember correctly, like you don't even have to give financial information. Like this is just
No.
basic business information reporting. So
If you're running a business and you've ever applied for a loan, this is less than a package you have to send to the bank with your information. I mean, basically, you're telling them who owns the business, where you live, and your ID. I mean, they
right.
already have that. It's already out there. I mean, honestly, if I wanted it, I can go to the dark web and get your information. It's there, but it's not that big a deal. Just do it. Just do
Just
it.
do it.
I'm
Just
telling you,
do it.
because like I was saying, you're probably going to email this loan package to your banker in unsecured email. You're probably not even going to encrypt it, so it's out there in the ether anyway. So you know what? It's not a big deal.
Yeah. I think that's worth a reminder. Not a big deal. Take the time to do it. Um, one other piece, I don't know if this is, I mean, this isn't really directly IRS related, but it is tax related. The Supreme Court, like a challenge had come up related to the taxing of unrealized gains, and the Supreme Court didn't take the challenge. So they've deferred this challenge, mostly, I think, as it relates to foreign business income. Um, and so we're not getting any resolution on that just yet. So I think, Jay, we've talked about that a little bit previously of some of the previous Supreme Court rulings, and probably the incoming administration are going to have a pretty good impact on the way that the regulatory environment changes. Did I freeze for everyone?
Yeah, you did. Turn
That's
your
great.
camera on and off real quick.
Yeah, let me do that. Uh,
Either that or drop off and jump back in real quick. It should be fine. But yeah, we had been talking about that, and hey, look, double J. So the thing about taxing unrealized gains is you have unrealized losses, and what are going to be the rules on that? Are we going to be able to take the unrealized losses as well, or just the gains? And if we're taxed on the gains and then we have losses, can we take those losses? And it's not really fair or fitting to go about that and leave that out there. So I let's there we go. Let's just throw me on there until Chris gets back in here. So it's really going to be a huge pain in the ass to track unrealized gains and then be able to track them, track the losses, and then come back to it and then file. I mean, it's unless we're going to force the investment houses and these companies with the foreign business income to track it, but it's not going to be easily done. So I highly don't recommend it. And, not that what we recommend as CPAs and tax preparers or tax advisors gets listened to by Congress, because odds are they're pushing through whatever they want at that point anyway. So with that, we'll sit on that. So uh, I know we're waiting on Chris to jump back in here. According to our run of show, he's got a tax story to talk about. So I'm going to wait on that real quick. Just looking ahead here, let's jump into some tech news. So let's talk about everybody's favorite accounting software company, Intuit. So they are making moves in the UK. Intuit has QB Sole Trader, which I believe is their version of the sole practitioner or the uh, sole trader, not sole trader, but so they're pushing that now for those with incomes under 90 pounds or 90, yeah, for under 90 pounds, and expected to replace self-employed in the UK. Seems like nothing. Seems like nothing, and they're just renaming the product in the UK, so not a big deal at all. So with that said, let's move on to something else here. Let's see. Bright, a cloud payroll provider, is updating its manager product and gets an update. So software products this time of year, upgrading themselves. I mean, we're used to those upgrades coming out year round, but heading into year end, a payroll product updating is pretty normal. Um, Dext is adding mileage claim functions. So you could do your expense reports and claim mileage. That's always a good thing. Like I said, I believe it was right after ZeroCon. I have not seen Dext actually since it became Dext. Last time I was in that platform, it was Receipt Bank. So it's been quite a while since I've been in there. Um, just trying to see what's going on here. See what Chris is up to, what kind of shenanigans he's getting into. So, yeah, no idea. Following up on that, a Dext adjacent company, Translucent, is letting you get into AR and AP transactions directly from Zero. So, Translucent is a sister company to Dext. I um, found out about that at ZeroCon when I saw their booth with all the skunks. It was pretty cool. They were giving out little skunks there at ZeroCon. Um, Sage is integrating with Chaser, which is an AR processing and automation tool. Chaser helps you collect debt, and they've also got a few updates to other Sage products. Um, there's now a statement integration tool to help for prepping trial balances. So looks like Sage is moving in the right direction. Sovos, long known as a sales tax reporting tool, is getting into 1099s. They have a product called 1099 Professional, and it's to simplify processing of 1099s. And, this is the time to start looking at 1099 processing. So it's really important to jump in there and do so. Um, don't know what's going on with Chris. So let's go ahead and keep on going down the list. So the FTC has finalized a new rule for click to cancel. Apparently, it's been way too difficult to cancel software and other items that you have a subscription to. So the FTC is making it clear and easier to do so, meaning that it is easier for you to cancel a service and not have to jump through 25 hoops to do so. I think that's a really good thing to happen and look forward to the day when that happens. Um, That's funny because today I was watching a story on streaming services, and apparently people are opting out of streaming services when they run out of things to watch on that said service, and then when new programs or shows are released, they are signing back up, and just like a repeating cycle of cancel, resubscribe, and it's throwing the statistics all over the place. So hopefully you're not going through any of that with your business. But yeah, the streaming industry is looking at that. They're hoping that the bundling of the different packages let's say Max with Netflix and I think actually Max is going to be bundling with the Disney bundle of Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN, and they're hoping that that's going to ease up on some of that. But they're also making it easier to pause those subscriptions and putting on I think it's a 12-week or a 3 month pause, allowing you to do that so that you can pause those subscriptions during certain periods and save on those fees when you're not watching those subscriptions. It's interesting how all that's going on, and how does that impact our accounting software and other things in that realm? And he's trying to get back in here, so I guess I'm going to have to bring him back in. And there he is. I covered half your news while you've been gone, so
I'm back.
yes,
I can't hear you,
I
which is not
covered
great. So give me
tech
just a
news.
second. All right, we're back.
So I've covered. I know you had a personal tax story, so I left that there. I've
Uh,
covered the FTC rule and tech
all right,
news. So take it
all
away.
right. Well, the personal stack story is not mine, Jay. It's yours.
Oh, it's
And it
mine.
may be,
Huh?
yeah, it may be more appropriate for a little later today.
Yeah. Let's save that for later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So, did you also talk about the other accounting news then, or just the FC? Were you coming from the bottom up?
I left the other accounting news to you because that
Great.
more looks like your wheelhouse.
Okay. All
So
right.
that's all yours.
Yeah, sure. And so, in other accounting news, the like I said, like Jay was talking about, the FTC finalized a rule for click to cancel, which actually, and Jay, I don't know how much you talked about this, but actually looked like a really cool rule.
Yeah,
Um,
I got into that a little bit, and I actually went off
yeah,
on streaming services because of the cancel and then resubscribe, and it's really throwing metrics and KPIs off on them. And
yeah,
they're putting in pauses in their subscription model to allow for that to keep from having that happening. But the FTC jumping in there is going to make it so much easier to do so. So
right. Well, and I thought about that too with all the different updates and changes and everything that's going along with all of the tech that you talked about. Like there are so many different things that are happening in the space out there that it is impossible to get away from subscription stuff. And when you don't want it anymore, it's really really nice to be able to do it, to get rid of it quickly, and to not have
yeah.
to worry about going through all the hoops. Um,
Well, I
there
wonder if
were
that's just going to be consumer based or if that's going to be business to business as well. Because
yeah
I can tell you, we dealt with an issue a couple years ago trying to
yeah
cancel a subscription we had, and I engaged them to renew 3 months before our renewal date, and they basically didn't respond to me, didn't give me any of the information I needed until we were within 30 days. And they're like, well, you didn't cancel within 30 days, so you're SOL.
mm,
And it's like, yeah, that didn't fly very well. So
no,
I'm
no, that's not
curious if
great.
FTC is going to apply, if that rule is going to apply to B2B
People. Yeah,
SaaS services
it
as well.
it will be interesting. I didn't notice that in the article that I read, so I don't know whether it will or not.
Yep.
But it's definitely nice to know that at least they're doing something.
Yep.
And I think that's a good thing. Speaking of doing something, there's a lot of accounting firms out there doing something. We talked about this particular one, like what feels like eons ago. So I'm surprised it's only finally getting finished. But CBiz and Markham, they finally finalized their transaction to like smush together. And there's lots and lots of activity in the accounting space. So I know that a couple of different companies are consolidating in the e-commerce support space. And lots of people are coming together to try to take advantage of those economies of scale. And so as a firm owner, one of the things that I learned, and or at least that we had some conversations around, and that I didn't get to enjoy so much because I had to leave. But at Camp A2X, like there was a conversation around like, where are you going and what are you planning to do? And I think a lot of people don't really think about like, well, I could not go anywhere, but just partner up with somebody who thinks a lot like I do, and we could just go on the same path together. Um, and you can see that that's happening in lots of different places. And obviously, Jay, you're a really good example of this, because that's
Yeah.
exactly what you did.
That's exactly
Uh,
what I did. Exactly.
Right. And so of course there's also like I read a couple articles about how PE can be good for how can actually be good for accounting firms. And so I thought that was relevant here too. Like that is another exit opportunity or partial exit opportunity, and it has pros despite some of the cons that we've talked about before. Um, there are also, I mentioned at the top kind of that, we're getting to the end of the year, and there are these like things happening. One of them, Whitley Penn. Whitley Penn is based here out of the DFW area. One of they're getting to be pretty large in DFW, but they have named a new CEO. And then of course the NASBA, they've announced some new directors. So there's some like finalization of those types of things going on, right? We saw the same thing with the AICPA and Mark Kozel, Mark, whatever Mark's name is, getting uplifted into Barry's old role. And you can see that there's just a lot of movement toward it's that time of year, right? Like your clients are probably doing similar things where they're evaluating their board of directors and making sure that they've got the right set of advisors around. And so being an ear for that, or being aware of whether those changes are occurring, can be really valuable to you as an advisor as well. So definitely be thoughtful of that, and know that these things are changing. So there are different people who and different leadership that's out there. Maybe it's not all that different than it was before, but they are changing it up anyway. Um, and then in the final accounting news, as seems to happen every week, somebody was doing a bad. In this case, the PCAOB busted and pulled the registration of JT Fair Song, which is a Chinese accounting firm, for violating some regular accounting rules. So the PCAOB doing some more governance and oversight, and pulling the plug on some folks. So I don't know what caused this. I didn't read that far into the article to know like they were committing the fraud, or they were just doing bad audits, or what they were doing, but they were doing something that they definitely should not have been. So whoops, don't do that. And this is a good reminder that the PCAOB does have a lot of power with respect to that, at least for now. And so you want to continue to make sure that you're playing by the right rule book, and that you're doing the things that you do appropriately, because they could do that. They can pull a plug on you if you're really getting out of line and getting out of step. Yeah, and so that's the accounting news. Did you?
I have one thing to add there.
Yeah.
I saw about an hour ago a story on ADM. You mentioned them last week, where their auditor
Oh, yeah.
backed out of their engagement,
Yeah.
and so apparently this week they canceled their earnings call,
Oh no.
and while they were implementing new controls, uncovered additional anomalies. So
Yeah, there's
yeah,
some fraud was
so
so. Long
yes,
story short, some fraud happened at AAM, everyone,
yes,
and that'll come out in a couple weeks, and the extent of it will come out as well. From personal experience, what I recommend is that if you own AEM stock, get out now while you can still get out, because it's just gonna get worse. Anytime, like I mentioned before, right? Anytime the auditor is like, I'm out, and they're out that fast, you have like a very serious problem on your hands, and it sounds like that's the case here. What that ultimately means for the company is to be determined, right? I'm joking in that sell no, right? I'm not a financial advisor. That's a decision you should make with all the facts that you have, all that kind of stuff. But if it were me, I would be out, because this feels very much like we identified some fraud, and if it's enough to kick the auditor is resigning, that's not a small fraud, and it's also not one that involves like just the AP clerk or something. This is probably a bigger deal. So we'll continue to monitor that and see what comes next there. But yeah, that's a big time problem for certainly for them. Yeah. All right, Jay. You mentioned that you talked about the tech news.
yep,
Is that
we got
yeah?
it all.
So you've got it all. All
Got
right.
it
So I have
all.
a couple different
Yep,
things like that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to get your specific like thoughts
sure,
about. And
go
so
for it.
I've not ever heard of the firm Sikich. or Skitch or whatever
Well,
they
actually,
are.
I did not get C, so you're good. Everything from there down, you're good. Sorry.
Oh, so the AI. So
Yeah, I
the
got
okay,
A
so
and
just
B.
the stuff.
So yeah,
A and B. All right, fantastic.
yeah.
So again, there's lots of activity, lots of small things happening, and maybe Jay, you went through the news that was like not really news. Um, so let me ask you this question: all those things that were happening there, like, does any of that sound like all that interesting, or are these like really boring pieces of information where like, yay, great, but eh?
I I think it's great for them to have it, but
Right,
it's a game changer. You know,
sure,
if it can increase efficiency and profitability, go for it. It's great to have it.
right,
And how are you going to utilize that with your clients?
yeah,
That's where I want to see where that news
right.
comes to play. So,
Yeah, and so that was all the what I think of as maybe the basic news. But this set of news is the more exciting news. This is all the AI
yeah.
related news, right? There's lots of people doing AI related things this week, and so Sikich, who is an accounting firm, who I'd never heard of, but is apparently a top 15 accounting firm. I don't know if they're like top 15 in the U.S. or top 15 in maybe the U.K., and that's why I've never heard of them. But they're launching an AI solution studio, and I think that's particularly relevant because what that means, what they're actually doing, is they have an AI advisory product offering for their clients. Right, they're advising their clients on the right AI tools to choose, on ways to upskill in their AI space, on how to manage the oversight of AI. And this is a product offering that I think is extremely valuable. And so, those of you that have interest in AI and want to build some expertise, like, you have an ability to turn it into this, because you can then take that skill that you have and that knowledge that you have and offer it as an advisory service as well, because it's going to impact your clients. AI is going to continue to be involved, as we'll talk about in the rest of the news here. So this can be a really, really important product offering, and so it's awesome to see this company already taking the steps to do that now, through this AI solution studio. So know that that's out there. Know that if that's that may be a place for you to go to learn more. Right? If you wanted to, you could reach out to these folks and say, "Hey, I'm interested in what all your product offering. What's your catalog even look like? What are the things that you're doing in this space? And how can I do something similar?" So I thought that was so. So again, maybe all these others are relatively small potatoes. This one felt like big potatoes because that's a really cool offering for an accounting firm. Um, Thomson Reuters, they are also doing some more AI related stuff. And they're incorporating their AI product support, which is called Co-Counsel, into OneSource. And so I think OneSource is their tax product, or one of their tax products, and they are incorporating an AI product support tool to give guidance and allow you to like do some investigating around issues you might run into, specifically to even finding guidance, which again is another one of these like that. These are the applications of AI that we've been talking about for this whole time of having better research opportunities and being able to add areas of your advisory practice. Like, this is the good stuff. It's starting to happen, and so it's great to see that Thomson Reuters is doing this as well. Jay, have you heard anything about Co-Counsel or OneSource?
I have not. No.
Yeah, yeah. So our friends at Microsoft, they're also like getting in the game here, and they're adding a variety of AI agent tools within Dynamics. And I don't know if maybe those are incorporated in other parts of Windows as well. That may be the reason why I got kicked out of the show earlier today. I had to update. Needed to do a computer update apparently, that my webcam or something wasn't connecting correctly, and so as I restarted, I actually got prompted to upgrade to Windows 11. So I don't know if this is I don't know. I don't know everything that's going on there, but it sounds like Microsoft is looking for all kinds of different opportunities to make changes and edits in their product, including with these AI agency tools within Dynamics. Another company is doing the same thing, Zendesk. If you're familiar, they're like a customer support application or tool, and they're adding AI bots and automations as well. So they're just continuing to happen. Some of those first ones, again, I think are the ways and areas where you'll see that they're complementing the work that's happening already, trying to make it easier for you, and trying to give you the ability to ask questions, to do things more quickly, but without the human interaction that often used to be in that customer support space. Um, what I will say is that these AI tools aren't always used for good. And I read an article this week about a scam out that's going on out there. So be careful out there. Here's a quick summary of the scam. So Gmail users specifically are getting an account recovery message. So like an email or whatever that says, "Hey, your account is compromised" or whatever. You need to recover. That if you click into that email, right, it then triggers a follow-up phone call from Google that uses AI voice tech to impersonate a Google representative. The message itself is the same kind of your like old school phishing style, right? Where like it's the message is what's initiating the call. Once you do some activity with that message, then that call is a follow up there, and that's something that Google wouldn't do unprompted. So that's the thing to be aware of. Like if you get this message, like and then a follow up call, be really skeptical because Google's not going to just do that. But I think it's AI voice tech is getting better, and it can be extremely good now. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, I think. But that was a scam that I thought ended up being really relevant and was related to AI. So these are lots of AI improvements happening. So you want to be aware of those things, understand how they impact you and your firm, and then how they impact you and your clients, so that you can use them in all the best ways, and then advise your clients on how to use them in the best ways. Any other thoughts on AI right now, Jay?
No, not at all.
All right, and that's the rest of the tech news.
My brain
So,
is spinning. No, no more thoughts.
yeah, there's a lot of AI tech that's out there, and it's really it's starting to like ramp up a little bit more. So I know that we'd seen like a small little pause as companies were like really evaluating, okay, how do I do this? How do I do this effectively? They tried to do some rollouts that were kind of fails and flops, and maybe these ones will be too. But they're continuing to do them, and they're starting to. I see more news articles every week of company X is doing something with AI, and they're incorporating AI into this part of their product. So
Yeah,
it's out there and it's
but
coming.
you look at who's in our space and
Right.
what is being done with this. I mean, think about last year at Camp A2X,
Mhm.
what Chad Davis from Live CA told us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Live CA, but he
Yeah.
told us, and you know how he took that manual process to predict the tables and what he was able to do with that, and where he's
Right.
gone today, and with the brain trust in the accounting industry, we can use this information and really take it to the next level.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm so looking forward to where it goes.
Right. Exactly. And so again, that's the another reason and another reminder to be on top of it and to know. Right. So keep listening. We'll keep talking about AI and where and who's using it next and how they're using it and particularly if they're using it in what seem to be unique or interesting ways. So and that was the news. Um, Sponsored by Feedly. No, not really, but maybe but maybe I'll get there. So I mentioned at the top that there was a I had started compiling the news in a slightly different way. Historically, I'd gone out to a variety of different websites. I'd Googled some things, but I was alerted. Thanks, Jay. To Feedly, which is an RSS feed app that allows you to consolidate all of the different websites and knock out a whole bunch of different feed all in one place, so that I didn't have to do all of that news research on several websites. I could do it all in one. So big shout out to Feedly for that. Because that was super helpful in consolidating the news, and it also meant that I got news from a variety of different sources where I didn't always before. And so some of that, maybe did make the news a little bit less interesting in some spots, but again, some of these were things I may have never found before. So that's just yet another automation tool to be aware of, and to see the practical application of. So they're out there and they're everywhere. Um, but on to our general discussion today, right, Jay? Last week, um, where were you? Where were you when you got the news? We talked. We talked a couple like whatever, it feels like forever ago now, but we talked about it. Uh, the first assassination attempt. Can you believe this? That there are these events in your life that you kind of will always remember. I was in X place when this thing happened, um, and and I don't know. This is just a regular presidential election. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. But where were you, Jay? Like, what were you what were you up to last Tuesday?
I was right here at home. I was
Yeah,
watching the returns on TV
yeah.
and didn't get much sleep
Mm-mm.
Tuesday night. Ended up watching a lot of news and not waking up, but getting up at 5:30 and Donald Trump being named president-elect.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
uh, I stayed up that night till about 2:30 my time. Um, I was watching on I was watching the Kornacki cam. I don't know if we've talked about this, Jay, but but uh,
We had not.
but NBC on Paramount Plus, you could get, there was the like regular feed, which was right on NBC News, and then they had a Kornacki cam, and they had and then they had like the little summary, like, of what's the status, or where do we stand, that was all in one platform. And so it was very similar to the Olympic coverage. That was like
Yeah.
the gold zone, where you have multiple, or on the NFL coverage where you have multiple
Yeah.
screens of the same thing. But it was really interesting to watch from that perspective, because you could flip back and forth. Like, you could tell, like, Kornacki was doing his research, doing his review points, and then you could see when he was on TV on it, because he was on MSNBC, not NBC News. And so, like, there were crossovers. Like, he'd be talking about something at one point in time when the other panel or whatever was talking about something else. And so you could switch back and forth to listen to Kornacki talk, or listen to the other panel talk, or whatever it was. And so I watched the Kornacki cam, uh, and I still remember, because I was watching it pretty intently, right? Because I was interested in the results, and I was interested in what was happening, and I was interested in the feedback, and I kind of still remember where the because the way that their little panel worked, like, Kornacki could click on counties, and you could see the county he was clicking on the, like, district, or no, it was county based. So you could see the counties that he'd be clicking on, and what the results were, and the reported results in those counties were. And I still remember, like, he was clicking around in some in Pennsylvania, and you could kind of tell by the way that he looked. And this was probably like at 11:30 Central Time, so like hours before the race was actually really called. But you could tell he knew what was going to happen, and
Hmm.
that was kind of the last one, right? Like, Georgia had already kind of been pretty far, and North Carolina was already, maybe had already been called, but I saw him clicking around on Pennsylvania, and then you could see he was like was a very nervous looking, like, thing, like, and it was very clear to me, like, oh, I see what happened here. He knows what's going on, and he knows what's going to happen, and seeing that view, right, is a thing that I will
Yeah.
never forget. It's I was just sitting on my couch, right? It's not like, and not like anything wild or anything, but
But
that memory is ingrained in my mind.
but it makes you want to know. I mean, all of the polls that they shared, it
Hmm.
was 47 to 47% nationally. It was within points.
Yeah.
Within three. It was all within the margin of error.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, none of it was. It was so far skewed.
Oh, I don't
And
know that that's true.
no,
And
it
that
really was.
so it'll be interesting to see where it, like, shakes out in the end, because I think there, a lot of what I was reading about this particular topic is that, there was a lot of polling related hurting, where
Yeah.
people were a little hesitant to get out of this very narrow band. Um, but I think, and once they count all of the votes in California, because California is so slow,
Right.
like, the overall is going to tighten up to where it was maybe like a point and a half, something like that. Like, it's not going to
Yeah.
be the like railroading that it looked like it was. But but
My
I do think it's interesting, like how that process works, and it's certainly something that, as a consumer of that news, I was like, I looked at those types of things all the time. Like I was looking at
right.
Cook Political like every other week, and probably at that last bit, I was probably checking 538's like polling average like every day, a couple times a day of like what percentage are we at now? And so it was really interesting because about a week ahead, it had got Trump had gone up to 60%, and then like teetered back down and back down and back
Mhm.
down back to almost exactly 50-50. And I joked to some friends of mine that like they were always going to end up at 50-50 because everybody felt like it was a coin flip.
Right.
And like you're talking about, Jay, like all the polling also supported that. But I do think that like,
But there were pollsters that went out on a limb and said that Harris was going to win,
yeah,
and the polls that they were doing showed that. And yet,
yeah,
I was in a conversation with Jeff from A2X, and
uh
he's like, Vegas got it right. And
huh,
the polls that Vegas was using asked who
yeah.
you were voting for, but followed up with, who do you think your neighbors are voting for?
Ooh,
And
fascinating.
that is how they honed in on it. It wasn't what
Nice.
are you doing? What do you think your neighbors are doing?
Yeah,
So, and I think it's interesting, and we're going to see a a whole new way that polls are done. I think in the future presidential elections, which will
yeah,
impact other elections too. So we shall
right.
see.
We will
But
see.
yeah,
Uh,
there
Go ahead.
have been a ton of announcements on who will be taking certain roles.
Right.
But the one that I'm interested in is, Treasury. Who's going to go over Treasury that could help influence tax policy? You
Yeah.
know, everything so far has been state or security related. We haven't seen defense yet, but we have
Yeah.
those picked. But I want to know tax policy, and I want to know what's going to happen with the IRS. And we talked a little bit about this Friday on how it
Yeah.
impacts e-commerce businesses. But let's talk a little bit how this is going to impact
That's right.
folks like us
So,
and
new
our
president, who did,
clients.
right?
Yeah,
But that's not true at all. This is not a new president. It's a new president for now, but this is an old president. So the good news about that is that we kind of have an idea of some of the like policy things that this person's interested in, because back in 2017, some of our favorite legislation, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, was fired up to reduce the corporate tax rate down to 21%, I believe it is, and include a lot of other tax provisions and the increase of the standard deduction, some reducing some of other deductions. So Jay, what do we know so far about TCJA?
well, we know that most of the business provisions were put in and they were made permanent, and the individual provisions were made to expire after 2025.
Hmm.
So um, there was an extender bill pushed through that passed the House last January, and if you've watched Chris and I for the last 11 months, we've been talking about that bill and how it's just been sitting in the Senate, and the Senate says, "Yeah, we're not voting on that." And so at this point, there are some very good things in that bill to extend, and one of those is, and it's on your list, but
Yep.
it's reverting that R&D tax expense and reverting back to the old way of handling that Section 174 deduction. And
Right.
that treatment has bipartisan support. It's got the support of most tax preparers and business. So
Yep.
let's get that done,
Let's
and
get that
let's
one done.
simplify that.
Right.
So that's
Well, then,
been that's been a fun change that we're dealing with.
yeah, and I think that's a huge one because the rule, and correct me, Jay, if I get this wrong, but these specific R&D expenditures, like historically under TCJA, like you were able to expense them at the time that they occurred. But as the provisions started to lapse and things went away, the Section 174 deduction became more of a capitalization requirement, where you had to capitalize a portion and you had to then amortize it over 5 years. So you were basically capped at 20% of those costs instead of being able to utilize them all, which meant that you had to go through the process of maintaining a record of all of these different costs, which means that you then had to do the calculation. If I remember correctly, if you're the person that you were paying to do the R&D, if they were here in the United States, you could use this 5-year term, but if they were someone that was abroad, you had to use a 15-year term. And so it makes the execution of this just so much more complicated. Where
Yeah.
where if you're able to just expense it all today, that becomes very valuable.
Well,
And
and
certainly
keep in
this comes from
mind, if it's truly R&D, not only are you expensing it today, you're also processing it through for a credit.
yeah.
And so it really impacts your bottom line,
Mm,
and it helps save you money on tax, and that's why I think it's so popular to get it back to where it was. Now, not that after it's capitalized, you still don't get the credit, you still do,
yeah.
but you're still uh, not getting the full expense of the
Right.
expenditure.
Yeah.
It takes up to 15 years to get all that back. So
Right. So I think this will be a valuable thing to just simplify, right? Make it easier for
yep,
sure. Um, I know that one of the things that was a provision in TCJA, I mentioned it already, was the lowering of the corporate tax rate. Um, I think there's been even some talk about lowering it even more. Um, Jay, what do you think that number one, do you think that that's likely to occur? And then number two, if it does, like what impacts does that have on tax professionals or accounting professionals, and then also on business owners?
well, I mean, if you just change the rate, and it was a progressive rate previously down to a flat 21%, and there was talk of the current administration raising it to 24, 28. And then, in recent weeks, we've heard the Trump administration wants to make it as low as 18. So, I mean, if that is all it is, it's just updating the software. We go and plan on the new rates and move forward.
Right,
Uh, the other side of that is, when they lowered it to 21%, we got the qualified business income deduction for the pass throughs. That would
mm,
be for the S corps, the partnerships, and for the sole proprietorships, to help equalize that between the pass through entities and the C corps.
right,
And so, are they going to increase that qualified business deduction? Are they going to keep it? I mean, at this point, we don't know. But my thought is they'll probably keep it and probably increase it maybe to 25% to equate to the 18% tax rate. So we have to see.
yeah. So that'll be a thing to watch out for of what happens there, because that does have a big strategy impact
Yeah,
on and especially on new entities that are just setting up. And those that are just coming into some first time profit, right? So if you're a
yeah,
startup of some sort and you're just starting to actually build out some profit, some capital, this is an important decision that you need to make. And how that is handled can be really impactful
I
in that
had
decision for
that
you.
decision not 2 hours ago. I said,
Yeah.
hey, should we do this? I said, no, let's wait. There's no sense rushing into it this year. So
Yep.
let's see what shakes out of the tax debate and what we
Yep.
have moving forward, and then we have that conversation. Because not only is a debate on that C corp rate, it's how does it all impact your specific tax situation between you and your partners or
Yep.
shareholders, and how it impacts the total picture. So let's wait and then run some scenarios across the board, and then make a best guess based on the information that we have, and not do it with a lot of speculation. So
Yep. And so we could speculate some more about some of the like personal issues that may come up. The SALT deduction for state and local
right,
taxes that was limited to 10,000 previously under TCJA. I think something under something, but that might get reconsidered and might get pushed up. I guess we'll find out theirs. But again, it's more
Right.
speculation. There will continue to be conversation around the child tax credit and what happens there. But again, that's all speculation. Then there's the like really fun speculation around the policies that were announced as things that the president elect was interested in, such as eliminating the tax on tips. Um, Jay, like if we're thinking about this realistically, this how likely is this to occur? Are we talking about 10%
Well, if we
chance?
look at tip earners,
Mm-hmm.
they are at both ends of the scale. You have tip earners that are at the low wage earning scale, and then you have those tip earners that are working in some of the swankiest restaurants where they're bringing home $2,000 or $3,000 a night in tips.
Right.
But I really think that if this provision does get looked at seriously, they're going
Yeah.
to look at it and put an income limit on the taxability of the tips at some point.
Mm.
I don't think that they're going to blanketly say no tax on tips, but uh, you know, stranger things have happened.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
We will find out. It's all speculation.
for
That
sure.
also goes for taxation of Social Security benefits, of overtime, of like civil servants, like firefighters and police officers, even military personnel. Like those are all things that have been floated, but they're all, until something is actually executed, it's just speculation. Yeah, it makes for fun
Exactly.
conversation. Um, so one of the things that I think is the like real important takeaway, and the thing that that I really want to give to people today, Jay, is like, how do you talk to your clients about this? Like, do you have the same conversation that we're having now of here's some things we kind of expect to
Yeah,
occur, but nothing's
yeah,
nothing's final till it's final.
yeah. And it's like we've done for the last 11 months. It's like
Yeah,
we know something's coming, we just don't know when and to what extent.
right.
So based on what we know, this is what might possibly never happen.
Yeah,
So, so at this point, it's like, let's just hold on and wait till we see what passes. So in January, when the extenders passed the House, I started teeing it up and started looking at the bill. And then the House is like, yeah, we're not looking at that. And realistically, it made sense not to touch it with
yeah,
an election going on. And I get
right.
that. But there were things in there they probably should have addressed. And it's like a couple of years ago, they pushed through some extender bills and they did it late January. And because of that, it impacted returns that were already filed. And they're like,
Yeah,
whatever you, and for the first time, they were asking people to extend their returns and don't file. And what they ended up doing was reprocessing them under the new rules and sending out refunds. Most of them generated refunds, and they sent out those refunds, and they were able to take that into account. But we don't need to be passing tax legislation after the filing deadline starts. It just makes it murky for everybody, and it's already difficult, and it's difficult conversations with clients
right.
when they owe money, and or they're not getting back as much as they thought they were, and that only makes it more difficult. Let's simplify this, and let's not jump into the fact that um, we're changing this after the fact. So
Yeah.
my thought is we're going to see a tax bill in early 2025 that will might be in effect for 2025, but most probably 2026.
Oh, okay.
So we shall see. Yeah, we
Yeah, and so
shall
that's
see.
a and those are the conversations that you have to have with your clients. You have to
Yeah,
let them know like
for
there's just
sure.
uncertainty, and
Yeah,
until it's finalized, you can you know what the rules are, and you have an idea of what the rules might be, but it is just an idea. Like nothing is
yeah,
finalized till it's finalized. So,
for sure.
um,
So,
and so
like you
then
said, how do we have those conversations? Open and honest. We don't know
yeah,
what's going to happen, but as soon as we do, we're going to nail
We'll
it
plan for it.
and have these conversations.
Yep. One last thing, Jay, before we get out of here, or maybe we can even save it for another time. But do you think it's a fun conversation or an interesting conversation to talk about tariffs today?
For those of us with clients in manufacturing and e-commerce where we
Yeah.
are buying goods from China to either sell directly or incorporate, it is a great topic to talk about. And
Right.
maybe we push that to next week and
Talk
yeah,
about tariffs
next week
specifically.
works. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, for
There
sure.
you go. Next week we'll talk
Yeah.
about tariffs, everyone. And then today we will wrap up today with the automation of the week. And so Jay, you did something that I think was really really cool, but we talked about it a little bit ago, or about kind of the
Yeah.
dangers of it. Do you want to talk about your automation of this week?
Yeah. So I was in the middle of building an automation when my ADD brain jumped into another topic, and it's like, hey, what if I clone my voice?
Hmm.
And because part of that was I was working on something and looking at a voice that I used in Faceless Video that I've been building, and I'm like, what if I use my voice? And I'm like, I did it, and it sounded really, really close. And I went and put emphasis on a few words, and it was like, oh, damn, that's really good. And then I sent it to you, and it's like, hey, and sent it to you, and it's like, hey, FYI, this is not me. This is AI generated. And you're like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
And that's
I was fooled. The Google representative bot would have got me, I think, because yeah, the AI technology has come a long way. It used to be you could kind of tell they were, a little choppy, a little like, talked a little too fast, that kind of thing. But this one like sounded like Jay. I thought it was Jay, and would have never thought otherwise. Um, and so. Uh, and so there are automations that you can build around this, or like things that you can do to make part of your processes easier by facilitating an AI talking bot instead of an AI chat
so.
bot.
So what drove me to this? I
Yeah,
saw a note about using some of the AI systems out there for video generation,
yeah.
and it's like, how do you use your voice when you're using a custom made avatar of yourself?
Mm,
And I'm like, ooh, made me think, because right now I am diving deeply into our onboarding process.
right.
As we talked last week a little bit, I've had an automated process there, but now it's like, how do we take responses, whether from a form or an email, process that through AI to read it and build a response? And you could use ChatGPT to do that and build your own assistants that utilize your policies and build out that information, and then send it off to these apps to build this video for you. So you basically take the script, you take what comes out, push it
Yeah,
through, get your voice, push it through to video, and it's going to make a video avatar of me. Now,
that's right.
it won't be the prettiest damn thing, but you know, it'll be effective, and
That's
we'll
right.
be able to answer and respond to clients with that, and
With your own
push them
voice.
with your own voice and
Yeah,
actually your own face.
yeah, yeah. Amazing.
And
And
so, and I hope to have a working prototype of this later, probably before the end of the year. I mean, I'm in the middle of a bunch of other projects right now, but I hope to have something along that line by the end of the year. And if not, I'll be working on that through the holiday season when I'm down, not working. I'll be working on things like that, which is like, I love that stuff. And it's like,
yeah,
when it's like, you're supposed to be on vacation. I was like, yes, this is it. This is what I want to do on vacation. Do fun stuff that I can't do every day. So
Right. Right. So again, AI chatbots, it's your automation of the week, like literal chatting bots of you. Your AI automation, or your automation of the week. So
yep.
thanks everybody for watching. That was the practice playbook for this week. We will see you next week. Hopefully, I'll be here for the whole time next time, but we'll find out. I will give you updates on the news, anything that we hear, especially if the Department of the Treasury has a new secretary or whatever. We'll talk through implications of all that, and maybe we'll talk through tariffs and
And we
the.
are adding a pre-show checklist to reboot your computer. So yeah,
Ooh,
we will
good
do
idea.
that moving forward. Yes. So with
Excellent.
that, we are out of here. Have a great rest of your week. We'll
See y'all
catch you
next week.
next Tuesday. See you,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.